I would like to say on behalf of the museum that we are truly honored tonight to have Germano Celant here with us. He is one of the most important art historians and curators in the world. He has done, of course, you all know, so many biennales and so many of the catalogs that are then considered to be the catalogs to study the artist, and especially for arte povera, as you probably know, and we all know, he even coined the term. So he's very much linked to the group of these artists. And this talk, he has been invited to talk about Marisa Merz, who is showing at the Gallery Bernier Eliades in Athens. It's her third show in Athens. A very important artist who only recently is getting the attention she should have had all these years. You probably have heard that she got the Golden Lion in Venice Biennale this year. It's a beautiful show. I hope you've all seen it, or if you haven't, you should see it. And of course, we would like to thank the Gallery Bernier Eliades for this event tonight that we're so honored to have. Thank you.
My talk will be a kind of personal memory, or talking about my relation with Marisa and Mario Merz, naturally, because when I met Mario and Marisa were around 1965, which is more or less 6 years after this picture of Marisa smoking. And it happens that, I was, at the time working as a young critic and curator, working for building a museum in Turin and doing a magazine called Marcatret. It was kind of historical, so, that's a lot of memory and time that we share together. Still yesterday night we talk by phone with Marisa, and, always trying to get her feeling about her work. And when I met her, she was naturally very shy and difficult to, or has been, difficult to get more information about her work. She was very kind of introvert, and naturally being a mother of Beatrice, she was totally dedicated naturally to the family, to Mario and to Beatrice, but also in the same time starting to express herself around 1965, 66, when I saw her, I saw the studio for the first time in my life. She was doing this kind of object that I think there is no documentation anymore, and Mario was doing this kind of pieces or minimal object crossed with neon. So when I start to meet her, naturally we spend a lot of time in the kitchen discussing, and that was in Via Giulia. And as you can see, there was no trace of a real and art object. You can see the number of Fibonacci by Mario behind, on the wall, and on the top, that looks like, a coverage for the kitchen, there was a piece of Marisa Merz. And this is the first beginning, and you don't understand, because life and work for them, and especially for Marisa, were very strongly connected. So you will find a lot of personal stories or personal psychological implication in the work, and which means is a kind of portrait. Whatever you talk and whatever you will see also around in the gallery or any institution, the Serpentine Gallery and so on, more and more are talking about the situation of herself, which is the situation of a woman starting to work in 1965, 66. And you can imagine at the time, there was no chance, there was no way to be recognized or slowly to be recognized, and that's why before was said that, she started to get recognition now. We were already recognized her, but still a moment where the situation was still increasing. The feminism period was not around yet, and the only manifestation at the time, 1966, was the first tentative of Lucy Lepard in New York to do a show was called Eccentric Abstraction, where the first time Louise Bourgeois also came out to attention. So it's a moment where, Eva Esser, Louise Bourgeois, Marisa Merz, all these women, they start to make history. Very quiet, very inside the house, mostly, inside the studio. There was not public recognition. So in a certain way, what you will see is slowly recognition that, happens because also of this kind of private condition of life. And the system of art in Italy has never been so powerful like in America. So the contribution, the support for contemporary art, women contemporary artists were not so great. And a little bit repressed, if not totally repressed. Anyway, and this is another part of the studio that, you can start to see this articulation of objects coming from the ceiling. As you can imagine, the period 1966 was totally dominated by two languages. One was pop art, was already recognized in 1964, and minimal art, which was, Donald Judd, Flaving, Solo Wait. So it was a kind of situation that was totally determined first by the American art, and there was not yet recognition of Fluxus or anybody of this kind of creative disorder. There is a show downstairs about a creative disorder by Kippenberger. And the idea of disorder was naturally against something that was an order. Metal order, industrial order of the minimal art, or the order of figuration. So there was no way that this culture, or this kind of people, they were trying to go against a certain imperial condition, because the information started to be totally determined by the Anglo-Saxon world, but also determined by this kind of strong languages, was pop and minimal. So the idea to do something that was chaotic, that was connect with netting in a certain way. Netting naturally is a gesture of female figure. The idea of sewing things or clipping things, these are metal things that Marisa was doing at the time, 1966, 67, he would see variation, and this was the studio that was shared with Mario with drawings and all this kind of things. You can see an accumulation, but I think it's important to see the chaotic part, because the disorder was language in a good way. Disorder, energy, very physical, very dangerous also. The idea of cutting this material was also cutting your fingers because of metal. So there is a soft element, but always with Marisa, there's also a tough element. And you will see through the scarpette, through the small shoe of ballerina, that this implication was very important to be sweet but nasty at the same time, to be sweet but then powerful, and to affirm an energy that was very strong. So the condition was to go against this kind of geometrical, pure, industrial things. Also, the idea of industry in Mario or Marisa, especially in Marisa, the idea of industry was more figurative, to create this kind of cave of material, a cave that can defend her against a situation. And when she was in the house, and I will show later, she would always sit in a corner in a chair, and the chair would become his territory. The only territory she has in the house, because the house was totally occupied by this incredible amount of material, was a chair, big white chair, the yellow chair that we can see before. You can see the yellow, there was a white one in the entrance of the house, and the chair became the territory of her expression. just netting and be alone and taking care of Bea and so on and so on. So the chair, you will see through the artwork, become an element, sitting and be in the corner. And that you will see through the work as a personal identity, defense, but also powerful of expression. So as I said, was against this minimal condition, this kind of aggressive industrial. And you can see at the same time, this is a little bit later, Louise Bourgeois using soft material. The idea of softness, the idea of a morbid material was totally against the rigidity, naturally masculine rigidity and softness of the female part. So that was immediately a code of languages that was adapted by the female artists against this kind of absolute reality that was industrial, was rigid, was metallic, was plexiglass, was something that created this kind of power of invasion, while naturally in the female elements, the invasion was, was accepted and was soft. And the idea of softness by Louise or Eva Esse became part of the fragility of the work. So the fragility became language. And Eva Esse was exactly the same. You can see, the contrast is enormous contrast between the, the minimal, the metallic, and the softness of, actually this is a kind of mouth, is the father, there is a lot of also reference to softness because the female figure always get, violated, get, treated badly by the parents, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of symbolic meaning using, certain material because you can touch it first, but you can enter. So penetration is part of it. So penetration is also softness. So that's what, this kind of rigidity was totally discussed, and this is Eva Esse. So you can see the same time, also this use of latex, which was a not rigid material. But latex also doesn't survive in time because breaks. So also the idea of eternity, the idea of, the idealistic condition of the work, they stay forever, while, life doesn't stay forever. And the female part of the life, is the acceptance of life and death. So when Marisa, and naturally there was also relationship with the other artists that were part in touring at the time, and you can see naturally the reference to Mario and to the arte povera people. I don't get involved with the arte povera discussion because I can speak for 7 hours, but the idea of life, the idea of energy, the idea of something that is dangerous. The glass is a dangerous object. You cannot have in your house. It cannot be collected. It's also the shell. The igloo is also a place where you repair yourself. Marisa didn't have a shell. She had the chair. The chair is the place where she stands. And she stands netting very quietly where there was a lot of cows around her. I was visiting, sleeping in the house, Beatrice playing, or whatever, or Tucci Russo, a lot of people, Sperone, everybody was coming to the house and share and have food together. So the only cocoon for Marisa was the chair. And that's a very important element. And naturally, the idea of energy. Naturally, there was different kind of energy, and you can see the famous 1969, so the period of the horse of Cunelli. So that was the extreme of the energy, to have a life condition. So you have body art, you have people using animals. So but that's a big story. I don't get involved. But just to get the context, that's very important because you can see her fragility and her power of fragility in comparison to this kind of already affirmative, strong occupation of space. She didn't occupy any space. She was totally connect. This was the bedroom where I was sleeping, and that's the altalena, Siso. You call Siso the altalena? The one. swing. As you can see, the altalena, you cannot use the altalena, and it's complete a disorder of the geometric figure. So if you compare to the minimal things, you can see immediately the counter reaction. First, you cannot use it, because if you sit, you slip down normally. And second, that's the piece outside of the context, but I prefer in the context of the room, because you can understand how she can create, trying to have a corner of the house, a small section of it. It was not a big house. This was the guest bedroom, and there was a bedroom for Marisa and the kitchen. So there was not so much, and this was near the river. And this is the guest bed. So the idea is to be part of life and to be also sitting not so comfortable. So it was not only the chair, but also the altalena was supposed to be something to play with. You're always slipping down. You always, it don't stay. I tried, but it never worked for me. But I was, And now you see, the kind of the purity of the piece. But at the time was kind of tools. I don't know if it was done for Bea or not, but that was the feeling that we had trying to sit there. And now I can see, not as an art historian, you can see all the relation with minimalism, the ephemerity. You can see that it's movable, it's not rigid like the minimal art. So there was something unconscious. You can never explain when you are there. You can never explain what you produce. I'm sure Marisa will say, "I have nothing to do with minimal. It's nothing to do with pop. It's nothing to do with anything." But that's part of being an art historian. Try to justify, try to read. And naturally, there is this famous series. This picture has been taken, I think, in Anzio on the river, on the sea. And the idea of what she was netting at the time. She used nylon at the time, not the copper. So, and nylon was very strong, was very difficult to net. And in fact, the ballerina shoes are very strong. You cannot bend them, but they are very light, but in the same time, they are very strong. There's something connect also with this idea of life and death, which I think always with the river and to take the picture. So there's always the idea of portability, that you can dress, it's part of your skin. So the shoes is the extreme of your body. It's nothing to do with the mind. It's only to do with walking. It's to do with kind of symbol of touching on earth. And also, naturally, there is an obsession, Marisa, to buy shoes, in the market sometime. And, when we were going around, she was always buying, this kind of light Chinese shoes too, so that was the time. And so you can see then that this kind of gesture that was produced slowly in the house became part of an independent object. So there was a gomitolo for on the right, there was a kind of bracelet in the center, and there was a shoe, there was a ballerina shoes, all done with wire and done with the nylon. And naturally, the pedestal is wax, which is a very important element. Wax is, again, very fragile, smelt, so it can disappear. So there's this kind of flotation. There is never an assertion. There is never an affirmation of something that has to stay forever, but it's part of her life. Life could be a portrait of Marisa. That's already a beginning of a portrait, because sitting there, she was putting, and then she was, asking, or people were asking to say, can you show, can you see your work? And she was always trying to be on the side and to find our existing material, and you can see the use of wood sometime in the drawing and in the leftover material that she's always recuperating, or wax. Wax, as we know, is naturally part of the old history, is Medardo Rosso. There's a lot of connection with the history of art, and naturally in Turin, the history of art was very determined by the 30s, and she was part of, a moment of the painting and the history of informal. So there's a lot of things be connect with Marisa and Mario, naturally, but mostly, the idea of wax, the pure wax, that as this kind of temporary, fragile form belongs to her. And you will see the use also of occupying perhaps a cup, perhaps a corner, perhaps something that is a kind of very small intervention and kind of silent, like the ballerina with the shoes. When you dance, you don't do a lot of silence, a lot of noise. And these are things that she found around the house, around the studio, cotton of material, and creating this object in the corner. She had a kind of strategy, and I noticed in the period of time, naturally Mario had a lot of shows, and sometimes she put a piece somewhere else in the part of the show. So it was a kind of secret collaboration, and never recognized publicly, but she was always there. She was always there with the material. She was always there doing a violin of wax. She was always there with a small scarpetta. And, this is a corner, I think, of the show that Mario did in Rome, at Latico. And nobody knew that this was a piece of Mario, of Marisa. So that's also a very interesting part for their collaboration, relationship. She was always soft, but always been there, not only physically, not only as a companion, as a wife, as a mother, but also as an artist. So I think we have to reanalyze a lot of picture of works of Mario and see perhaps some moment of Marisa that we didn't study properly. And this was typical of this collaboration between Mario and Marisa to, the coperta, and that's Mario looking at the piece and carrying the work of Marisa. So in a certain way, this secret dialogue, and also was totally accepted by Mario, totally supported by Mario. Also, Marisa didn't want to show, to push her to show a lot, and actually was a lot of fight, arguing, and I was in between, say, why, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, that was the kind of material that Mario and Marisa produced together in all their life. Still, in a lot of works of Mario, you will see object by Marisa. When we did the show at the Guggenheim, she insert, several pieces on the table. So it's part of, to be a companion, but also to be an artist, and not to show up, and to cancel show, as somebody knows here, several times before they do it. And she doesn't want to do it because at the last minute she doesn't want to do it. So that's part of this kind of shyness, is to be there, but you don't want to be there. You don't want to. You want to do in your home, and the best, naturally, the show is always in her house. It's always in the room where she shares with Mario, Marisa, and Bea. All over the studio in Milan or Turin, that's the best moment. And when naturally is going to the gallery, it's totally different reality. That's what she's afraid. She's afraid that the white wall cancels the intensity of the accumulation in every space, because the intensity of the house, the intensity of where she lives, the intensity to get the confusion between an artwork, a teacup, or a table, which is by Mario, but is used by Marisa. So this kind of transpassing is a very important element for Marisa, that typical of a male, you show up, and she doesn't. That's the sensibility of she wants to do all the time. And that's, you can see these pictures. You don't know if, that's part of accumulation and is a part We don't know if the piece, is still like that, because that's a very interesting part of the work of Marisa. She can change a piece in the process. This is also another story of Mario when she started to work in the 50s. And they discuss a lot. And I remember when, we start to visit each other or to talk, the idea that the work has a life. The work cannot be finished. The work cannot be always frozen. That idea of frozen work is not so good. In fact, there is a story about Mario Merz that once, he went to a collector, sorry to use the word collector, but, somebody who has, a work of Mario Merz, and he said, can I have it? For a few days. And the guy said, oh, sure, you are the artist, I don't care. Then, after 2 weeks, he returned, and that's not my work. And says, yes, it's your work. I painted because he has to leave. So he painted again, he painted over, because the work has to continue his life. So the artist can give new life. So you rearrange the work, you retouch the work. I know for museum it's not so good, but that's conservation and touching and changing. But that's part of the manifestation. That's why Mario was using the fruit, the live fruit, because fruit can get rotten and you have to replace. Sorry, that's no way. So the work has to be furnished with new food. And the artist can give the new food, or the movement of the work can give new food. So Marisa can come and change a piece, and that's part of this idea of artwork be alive and not dead, which is what we use, is to be a frozen element in life, which is a painting or a sculpture or anything, cannot be heavy, can be heavy, while this is very light. Cannot be moved. This old tradition of thinking. Instead, I can change. We can change. Naturally, you have to have the approval of the artist. As a curator, you don't do it. But, all the artists do, they say, oh, yeah, this piece can go under the rain. That's okay. It's part of the life of the work. So the start idea of the shoes, the ballerina start to be they became kind of iconic of her presence. So it started also to be more under pressure to show works, to be part of exhibition, and, till starting the 80s. I remember when I did Identité Italienne at the Pompidou Center, she had the room. So she started to be more recognized. Also, if it was never part of, let's say, the Arte Povera group listed properly. She was always there, but as our reactionary position as a male, we didn't include her. So it's a part of of the time, and while slowly everybody became conscious because of also the period, the feminist art theoretician like Alla Lonzi, Lucy Lepard, Louise Bourgeois, Eva Esse, everybody started to pay attention, forced to pay attention, being male, but a female counterpart. So that was important, and that's what became, and there's Marisa with the piece, which is kind of art. So the idea of sound, also the work as a sound, the work as a life, the work as the water. You can feed with the water, you can feed with the sound. So this kind of picture represent also the idea that the work is not, again, a frozen element in life. You can use it and can disappear inside, slowly. What's happened is that she started to recuperate, to do form in space that were more natural, because finally she got the second picture was this studio, a big studio with Mario when she hanged all the pieces, and finally she started to have more space for herself. But the symbols tables. You can see the table at the beginning. We eat there, so the tables start to be part, or any object she was finding, and still piece of wood and in the street or in the house become part of the structure of her work. So in a certain way, art become food, food for the soul, food for the mind, food for a lot of elements. And naturally, there was a formality in starting to knit the ballerina shoes. You can see on the right the A, which is a letter, because she did also a piece called Bea, dedicated to Beatrice, and the square, which became a kind of very easy way of netting. When you're preparing a pullover or everything, that's the first part of what you do. So in a certain way, you can see that now the articulation of her work start to be more identifiable as a language of an artist, and an artist that not anymore secluded in the corner of the house in a normal, is a small, if big chair, but now she started to express, to be asked by, Fabio Sargentini during the exhibition, and slowly push towards to be more public. And as you can see how, this kind of, the cup, the ballerina shoes, the needles, they, because it was not finished, so she put it there. And I don't know what's happened to the piece, but she has to finish. So the cup also become a container of milk, of tea. There was, during the situation in the house, you can see that the pedestal of the table is in the wax. So you can see start a universe of circulation of elements that are very important for her. Naturally, the flower is somebody alive that can die. So it's a kind of fruit for Marisa. It's the answer to Mario. It's not anymore the fruit, it's not anymore something you eat, something more gentle, more a flower. So, there's always this secret dialogue, which, with everybody, but naturally, I think, with Mario. And you can see now the museum exhibition, and start the first head with a very fragile pedestal. That's a very interesting point, because these pedestals are very scary for any collector or any dealer, because if you touch, they move. And I think she did intentionally. Nothing can be not intentional, Marisa. So they always do like that. So the idea that, again, the statue, which seems strong, is very fragile, can be broken, which has happened in the museum. So in a certain way, this kind of invention that recuperate metal from the studio, Mario, and so on, became part of also this situation of a precarious situation of the sculpture, the fragility of the sculpture, the less affirmative elements of the sculpture. There is not a heavy pedestal, the white, which is a white cube of traditional with the sand inside that you don't move, and that doesn't work with Marisa. So that's you can see now the chair, and you can see the needle, the big needle. And that's a chair, you can see the chair. I don't know what was on it, because it looks kind of two shoes, two ballerina. So you see the chair is very important, because that's a memory of the struggle or the identity. She sits always there. So chair is becoming another icon of a ballerina passing through, very light, but very strong, and be always, that's very important too, be with the shoulder on the wall. So she was controlling everything. She was never in the center at the beginning, because in the house, the corner was like that at the entrance, so the corner was this, the chair was there. So when you entered, there was the chair, and that's it. She's controlling the entrance, she's controlling everything. So that's I think then the chair start to move slowly, you see. And these are kind of interventions she was doing when she get the occasion, in order not to be, again, a fixed operation. You know, the installation process is always to be site-specific. So when she was invited, she can use as much as she can, you know, the situation of the space, using the garden or using the, you know, or using whatever it is was available as a space. And that's one of the biggest shows she did in Turin, I think at Tuccirusso, where you can see there is a kind of accumulation of, it's not leftover material, you know, there was a kind of toy of a kind of bicycle duck on the right, and there was, you know, another head at the end. There was this kind of recuperation of one structure of Mario. You can see the on the back, you know, you can see the metal structure. Mario was using a lot of them in order to put the painting, and she used instead to a very fragile element, again, a dialogue and an answer, a dialogue and a different identity, you know, to establish a different identity. And actually you can see also the triangle of the swing element, the altalena we call. And there was a lot of wax. You can see that kind of occupation of space, kind of territorial, but again, very fragile. That paper, you can see here a little bit better. And there's a cup and there's a wax. So the wax is contained, the pedestal has two functions. One is very strong, which is the traditional pedestal, but then she has her pedestal, which is a wax piece, white, and then wax on wax, and then the cup. So the cup is a container, you know, a container that always has to be filled up. It's a container that needs to be furnished every time with energy, with whatever, water. So it's a symbol of continuous life. It's, you know, this museum is full of cup. You know, it's full of, you know, drinking, it's full of continue to be nourished and to be part of continued process of life. And it's interesting to see all the territorial, she refused to be in a certain way in the same space of other artists that they were using, like Calzolari, Bagnoli, they were using the same space, I think, at the time. So she covered the space to make her own wax. So if you walk on the wax, you break it. So it's a fragile thing. So, and these are, you know, kind of details. And then, you know, the variations start to be part of her work. You have seen first the spiral or triangle. Now is a different spiral. Naturally, there is the spiral, you know, is a symbol of, again, life, continuous life. Eternity is a very ancient sign from the Nazca period, and but also is connected with a relation with Mario and the Fibonacci. The Fibonacci start 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and 21. But it's not there, Fibonacci. But there is a triangle. There is a triangle of, you know, of the material of Marisa. And you see another variation, which is the old work, you remember, was with the table. Now it's recycled with another work. That's exactly what Marisa was doing, and is still doing. So be careful. And then, naturally, finally, she had been doing portrait for all her life, but to admit that her work is a portrait of her, you know, I think it's a very difficult gesture because, first of all our generation, all our artists were never personal. You know, they were never involved with showing their identity. It's all the idea of being political, you know, 68, 69, to be minimal, conceptual, body, but only about, you know, the 80 when idea of conscious, be conscious about, a different identity, being female, but also different identity for everybody, portraits start to come back again in art because you're firm that your face, your self-portrait, is a way of telling a story. You're a storyteller about yourself. You're a storyteller about your life. You're a storyteller about your pain. You're a storyteller about your drama. You're a storyteller about your family. And actually, this idea of talking about yourself is a strong statement. It's a strong affirmation to say, I'm not talking about art only. I'm not talking about public meaning. I'm talking about personal meaning. I'm talking about person as a political person. And so that's, I think, is a big shift that continues still today in the portrait. And I think at the beginning she was shy to admit. So she had this veil, and she covered her face, as a kind of defense. And there's a lot of painting, if you see in the catalog, with the veil. It's not a veil of, religion. It's just the veil of a little bit be behind, I'm never in front, stay. And this piece can be seen with the veil or without the veil. But that's, it's always talking about something. Also, the veils go on the floor. So, and also is a ephemeral installation. It's kind of on the floor, so there's no defense. You can kick it, it's dangerous. Danger for the artwork. But for a person, you stay exactly on the floor, like the ballerina shoes, just in a fragile way. So you see, that's natural. There's another permutation of square, and the portrait with the hand in front. Again, this kind of looking through. And a kind of different veil, the hands. And you see a lot of these hands too. And this is a kind of show that when she starts to be known, people, start to ask and demand for having two different pieces, different periods, and so on. And this is Rivoli, which is a kind of room, blue and blue, and again, there is this always contrast between the fragility of the painting. Naturally, the color of she didn't commission, she was not commissioned, but she found a way to integrate in the room of Rivoli, which was decorated, and the heavy structure of the Meccano. Meccano is a very male construction. The only kids play Meccano, not female. So not so many. And so the portrait now become part of a story, and now she's so strong that she can do tons and very subtle, very fragile again, and very personal. So then she started, this is in the 90s, to produce more and more this kind of portrait, and the scale also changed, became bigger and bigger, naturally still struggling to be public, but also in the same time to accept to be public to herself, which makes the work completely different, more powerful, more colorful. You see the hands here are less out of the, and you can see the portrait, it's kind of, I think as a young person, I always, think about it. That's why I showed the 1959 picture at the beginning, because she's becoming younger and younger now. To decide to be, alive more, alive in a sense that she's becoming public. She's showing. She's, having more color in her face, not white, not gray, and so on and so on. And you see now this kind of installation, which is kind of trap. It's a dangerous to go through, to touch. It's very fragile. The cone is wax. The net on the right is outside of the wall, but also is controlled by this string that cross the room. There is naturally the chair again, So the corners now is bigger. Before was very small in the house, now it's taking the big corner. Naturally, the chair now is becoming metal, which is heavy and dangerous. But naturally, she adapts also to, that's a rivalry again, to the structure as we see before. You see, the chair is always, this is a kind of chair for children, which I think is a memory of going back or dedicated to Bea. You know, there's a lot of personal, and this again is the show, I think, is the Pompidou. So you see now it's enlarging and accepting, creating always the territory for her sculpture, you know, with the wax. Before was paper at the Tucci, and you can see the big net on the left. This was the show that we did in PS1 '84, and that's what's. And you can see the pedestal. The pedestal is always found in the street or found in the idea of you know, let's say in New York we found a place where it was destroyed. We cut the beam and we installed the piece like it was. And you see the door, recuperation, and this was the table. So you see the multiplication, the existence. Now you know the code. And that's started a series of this kind of rice drawing. Rice, again, is very fragile, is oriental. You see how it is hanged, there is no frame. When there is a frame, the frame is done by her. So it's wood, and this food recuperate. And so it's always kind of precarious, and in a certain way, you can roll and disappear. I think that's one of the most beautiful portraits of Marisa. So you see the wood, you don't know if it's part of the piece. And so these are the drawings that you see also here. And this is the large-scale piece. She's producing more and more, and going back to a certain period, perhaps of, you know, kind of more decorative moment of, but very luxurious, very baroque in a good way. You know, it's less minimal, less reduced, less constrained, it's more explosive. It's really an explosion of color, flame, everything. And this is one of the last show that she did, not the last, but, and you can see kind of altar installation of the work. That's it. Thank you.
Together with Jean, I would like to thank very, very much Marisa Merz and, of course, Beatrice Merz, because she helped us so much. She was so helpful to come to this result of having this beautiful exhibition at the gallery today after so many years. We are going back to the years in the 80s when we worked with Marisa in the old gallery in Marasli. And after so many years, it's a fantastic memory. And if Beatrice was not helping us, perhaps it wouldn't be possible to do it. Then I would like to thank very much Germano Celant, who came all the way from Milano and gave this very nice lecture. And of course, the museum, the Cycladic Museum, who is hosting us tonight. And I think that it's worthwhile looking at that show after this lecture, because a lot of people will understand how this lecture that Germano gave and the show at the gallery gives a big explanation of what Marisa Merz is. Beatrice, thank you very much, and Germano and Aphrodite.